Hello, and welcome today to our mini-series on understanding and mitigating the risk of internet-connected industrial systems, where I'm really going to introduce several concepts and explore a lot of unique aspects of the risk that we face when we connect devices to the internet and sometimes are not aware of their presence. My name's Joel Angelo. I'm the founder of the Industrial Control System Cybersecurity Institute, and I'm also the founder of the popular website SCADAhacker.com. And I would really like to welcome you all today as I participate in Phoenix Contact's celebration of the National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So I prefer to teach through real-life experiences rather than present theoretical aspects of what's happening in this world in terms of cyber threats and their impacts. I like to share real stories that have come about from actual working in the field. And the data that I'm going to present over this course of these few mini-series modules is how I was called in to do response and remediation of an actual facility in the United States. We'll talk about what was identified, how I was able to do data analysis, threat identification, and finally remediate that risk. So let's begin. There's a background that's important for you to understand as we move forward in this. So here's the scenario. We have a remote site that's unmanned but remotely monitored and managed by a managed service provider. So what happens is this is an actual manufacturing or industrial process, and it's in a very much remote area, difficult to get to, and it's very small in size. But what's very interesting is that this site is considered an attractive site because it happens to be owned by a recognized critical infrastructure entity. And what we do on this site is we provide basic site monitoring and control of the processes that are taking place, as well as some very important safety and environmental parameters that must be measured and reported on a daily basis. On occasion, it's also required that we perform some configuration and modification of the operational schematics that can be viewed remotely, as well as modifying the PLC's configuration logic based on conditions that may or may not change. Now, what this consists of was a larger system integrator actually procured this industrial equipment from an OEM supplier that created a packaged environment which could be deployed as is in this particular installation. And completely unknown at the time, a concurrent cybersecurity exercise was actually taking place overseas where some very interesting characteristics of this site were discovered during this exercise. So we start with this packaged equipment, and what it is it's actually a utility monitoring system where a OEM takes and buys a bunch of components and then brings them all together into a nice integrated package. What's very interesting here is the pre-configured nature of this, and also why it's very important as we start to look at cybersecurity and industrial systems, how the supply chain comes into play here. So doing a little bit of research, just doing simple internet searches, I was able to disclose quite a bit of significant information about what was installed on this site before I ever visited it for the first time. If you look at this text provided by the supplier of this packaged equipment, they do a very good job of drawing an architectural picture for you that can help to understand not only its operation, but also its implicit risk. To begin with, they specifically name the manufacturer of the programmable logic controller. In this case, it's one of those MicroLogic PLCs manufactured by Allen Bradley. They also throw in an Automation Direct Seymour color display panel. And what's unique about this panel is it has a lot of embedded capability. Some of that includes an FTP server. It also has the ability to email reports on a regular basis, and it has a built-in web server. All of those features seem very attractive when we initially reviewed this system from the supplier's point of view, because we needed to have those daily reports sent to us. We also needed to have the ability to have very simple remote graphics be viewable over this built-in web server. The other thing that's quite important here too is the remote telemetry that it was supported, where it came pre-supplied with a wireless LTE, 3G, 4G, GSM type cellular connectivity that then would connect this particular system to the wider public internet, and allow us to view this information remotely. So as you can start to see, we can have various risk aspects that start to show up. One, with services that we may not necessarily desire, like FTP servers, which provide very little encryption of authentication mechanisms. Also, the connectivity of this system to the internet. Remember, every mobile device you have, when it's running, actually is connected to the internet. It's doing it through our cellular infrastructure, but in this particular case, the data aspect of that system makes it have a physical IP address. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a lot of this, of what came about here. What's really important here is how we see the supplier, the OEM, telling us that they can get everything fully configured and operational prior to it ever leaving the factory. So let's take a little bit deeper look. There's a popular website called Shodan, and what Shodan is it is a kind of like a Google of devices. We all use Google on a regular basis. Google catalogs web pages. What Shodan does is it catalogs internet-connected devices. These devices don't necessarily have to be industrial control system devices. They can be any range of device, like closed-circuit televisions, even wireless routers that may be connected. So it's irrelevant of the device type. It's just a massive global infrastructure that continuously crawls the internet, looking for devices and specific characteristics of these devices. So in this particular case, as part of this cybersecurity exercise that was taking place overseas, the asset owner actually found their system on there. Because like Google, you can just type in general search criteria into Shodan. And that's exactly what they did. They typed in their company name. And lo and behold, boom, it was identified on Shodan and flagged as an industrial control system. And you can see what Shodan was able to discover was very similar information to what the OEM supplier said about that equipment. You can see the FTP services there. You can see the web services on port 80. You can see other very important characteristics of this system, like the fact that Allen Bradley Micrologics is connected using Ethernet IP over TCP port 44818. Now, this is a little bit disturbing because Shodan is able to see those ports and services, which means there doesn't appear to be any security mechanisms between the PLC and the Shodan services. So of course this triggered a response protocol where I was then called in to start doing some investigation and take a look at exactly what happened and what could be remediated. A couple other important things to look at on this slide is the actual FTP banner. Since this was pre-configured by that OEM in their factory before it was ever shipped, they just simply put the client's name as the project name for this Seymour panel, which automatically then put that name, the project name, as the FTP banner, fully disclosing the asset owner's attribution, their name in this case. So as you can imagine, this caused a lot of concern. Now, what's really interesting too is how we can do a little bit further enumeration. So I'm a certified ethical hacker and I like to play around a lot in this space. So what I did is as soon as I found this particular asset, I decided to do a little quick query of my own using a Linux operating system and a very common command line program called hping3. And what I did was I wanted to go out to this site and really see everything that was exposed. So this very simple command, I targeted the same IP address that I found from Shodan using this hping command, and I spanned the entire range of all 65,535 TCP ports to uncover this list of 6 ports. Now what's very interesting here is that, as you saw in the previous slide, Shodan didn't necessarily discover all of the ports that were open, But me, the way I chose to do this is I wanted to look for each and every port that was available on the internet from this site. And what came out of this extra step were two very, very important ports. These are the ports that expose that Seymour panel from Automation Direct to allow me to do remote configuration of the actual display, which means I could go in, I could change FTP characteristics, I could change web graphics, I could even change usernames and passwords. So, as you can see, we had ourselves quite a lot of risk that's now been uncovered and exposed. So what I did was I took this little device right here and I deployed it in line in that facility. So at the request to the client, I said I would really like to collect some data and see A, what's happened in the past, and B, really have people found this site and started to do anything malicious. So I put this simple little device in line, and what it was going to allow me to do was to passively collect all of the network traffic. So it sat in line, I just disconnected the existing cable, and then I plugged this in and put a new cable in back to the wireless modem, so that I see everything in front of the Seymour panel, which is effectively the raw traffic coming into this particular device. So what we do is we're going to use this now in order to learn some network analysis tools and start to do threat identification, which then will introduce us to how we mitigate the risk. So we're going to end it for this mini session, and I want you to come back. We're in the next session, we're actually going to look at the data analysis from the device. Remember, I took this device and I installed it, let it run for about 7 days. So that's not really that long, but it was enough to get an idea of exactly what was going on that particular system. So I hope to see you come back soon when we continue this mini-series. Thank you.